and welcome to the Dragon Con 2023 Skeptic Track. Thank you so much for coming today. We're so happy to see everybody here. So I know that, oh, Margaret, Mark's going to come cut you. So don't break his lights and don't touch the mic. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to hear all about cursed artifacts. And Kurt Anderson is going to be your moderator. And yes, indeed. Y'all know him. He is one of our favorites here at the Skeptic Track, does wonderful magic shows, and is currently getting his PhD in deception, literally. So thank you so much for joining us. Take it away, Kurt.
All right. Hey, we're glad to have everybody here. First thing we'll do is we will let our panelists each introduce themselves. I have got to know these folks over the years and done panels with every one of them. But some of you may not know them that well, so we'll do brief introductions. Then we will talk about this item right here and its history, and we will go from there. So my name is Kurt Anderson, professional magician for 30 years, and back into academics after the pandemic put me as an unemployed artist. And I am researching deception, how deception is built, how we interact with it, how to protect ourselves from deception. So my life is kind of taking a transition right now, but I'm glad to be here, and we'll just kind of go right on down the line.
My name is Benjamin Radford. I am the longtime deputy editor for Skeptical Inquirer Science Magazine, a research fellow with the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. And I particularly love this topic because it intersects with some of my background in terms of psychology, and education, critical thinking, and investigation. So happy to talk about cursed objects and weird things like that.
Hi, I'm Steve Novella. I'm a producer of the Skeptics Guide to the Universe podcast, executive editor of Science-Based Medicine, standing too close to my microphone. And I will be talking about on this panel my close encounter with a famous cursed object. You'll hear about that shortly.
And I'm Margaret Downey. I am the one and only in the entire world, in the entire universe, as far as I know, the only frigatriskaidekaphobia treatment nurse. We started the Frigatriskaidekaphobia Treatment Center in 1993, and we've been having a great time on Friday the 13th, dispelling myths and superstitions.
Margaret, can you go ahead and give everyone a definition? Because they're probably not as familiar with that word as you are.
Oh, the Frigatriskaidekaphobia Treatment Center. Okay. Well, Frigatriskaidekaphobia means fear of Friday the 13th. That's why we have our treatment centers opened on Friday the 13th. The next one is in October, and we will be selling a brand new book at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. It's The Fear of Number 13, and it's for children.
All right. So let's talk about this. I was on Facebook garage sale, and I saw an ad for a cursed tea kettle. And I'm like, okay, interesting. It had a picture of this item. And so I'm like, and it was like, message me for pricing. I'm like, okay, this is either a scam or a great story. So I messaged, I said, hey, is the tea kettle for sale? And how much is it? They're like, yes, it is. It's $1. I'm like, I am on my way. So I messaged a friend of mine. Well, first of all, I get the address, I check it out, and I live in Alabama. And this is in the middle of, like, nowhere where this is located. And then I noticed that and let me start, before I start with this story, this is in no judgment of the person that I bought this from, although the way I probably characterize them through my eyes may not be flattering, okay? But it's like literally no judgment to them. I don't know what their life like, their history, so forth, right? We all have a different path in life. So I'm telling this story through my lens, to be fair. So I look at their Facebook, and they are a medically retired from the military with PTSD issues, and they live kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I messaged a friend of mine. I said, hey, I'm going to go buy this tea kettle for $1. I need you to go with me. He said, why? I said, because I don't want to be hanging in a shed having my skin removed alone. He goes, so you want me hanging next to you? I'm like, yeah, kind of. I said, hey, you're a pretty big guy. We'll take my truck. It's tinted windows. I'll just tell him you're my hunting buddy. Maybe they'll leave us alone. So he's like, you're the only person I know that would ever call me to go get a haunted tea kettle, but sure. So we go and we get to the house, and there's big iron cross on the garage and a cross and some religious symbols by the door. And I'm like, this has got to be the right place. And sure enough, a smallish gentleman, pretty frail looking, dark, all black clothing, black hoodie with holes in it, long, unkept, unwashed hair, teeth that had looked like what I call meth teeth. It had the little black holes in the sides and kind of nubbed. And he comes out and he has a Super Saver grocery store bag held at arm's length with everything he's got to hold this. And he comes out and he says, do you have your dollar? And I said, yes. And he goes, here, this needs to be off the property as soon as possible. And I'm like, I understand. And he said, now it did say at your own risk, purchase at your own risk in the ad. And so I said, can you tell me the history of it? And so he told me a little bit, and then on my way home, I got a Facebook message from him with the whole story. And so the story is like this. If any of you are familiar with the large tornado that went through the South a few years back, Tuscaloosa is my hometown. It went right through there. His house that he was in was completely destroyed. It took him a few hours to dig his way out, and when he got out, he looked down, and at his feet was a deck of tarot cards, completely unharmed. Box was perfect, and he took it as a sign from God. So he picked the tarot cards up and walked about 11 miles to his mother's house. He was late 30s, early 40s at the time, but he went to his mother's house. This is where I bought the tea kettle and where he still resided. And he said, hey, basically, he had this tarot cards, thought this was the thing, got to his mother's house, and started to witness hauntings in the house, hearing people walk around in the attic in boots, and there was not enough room to walk around the attic. Both of his cars would break down at the same time, periodically, which I described because they were both 1970s, early 1970s cars that were not very well kept, so it didn't seem that surprising to me. Then a squirrel chewed through their power line and put out their ceiling fan, their refrigerator, and their stove all at the same time. So that was a supernatural occurrence, although he attributed it to a squirrel. He would hear noises and things and went through a string of bad luck. And so he felt like something was causing this bad luck and something was cursed. And one night he woke up and there was a succubus in bed with him. Right? The story gets better. Succubus to me is a mythological female creature that seduces males, and wants their soul or other, payment. And he said the succubus was the most disturbing and yet most beautiful creature he'd ever seen. And he refused to have sex with her, and she left, and he started waking up with bruises and scratches on his body periodically, and felt like that was a succubus returning to have sex with him. And then one night, the succubus took over and raped him, and he felt like, he had to do something, and he opened his drawer in his room to look for whatever, I don't know what he's looking for, but he said there he saw the tarot deck. And he went, oh, this is the cursed item. So he got on the internet, as everyone should, to remove cursed items and succubus from their life, and contacted a Hopi Indian man in New Mexico to remove the curse. And this Hopi Indian man was so nice as to sell him a way to remove the curse. And so he sent payment. They sent back these 2 pieces of paper with these spiritual glyphs on them and instructions to take the tarot deck, get a cast iron teapot, Put the tarot deck in the cast iron teapot. It must be cast iron, otherwise it won't hold a soul eternally. Not my rules. Puts the tarot deck in the cast iron teapot, burns them. When the flames go out, adds a rosary. So I didn't know Hopi Indian men were also Catholic, but added a rosary, and then fill it with water and seal it with gaffer's tape. And then he was instructed to sell it to somebody, because if this ever opens, the succubus will get out and it will possess whoever owns it. And as long as he doesn't sell it, he would still be the owner. And he didn't feel right charging more than $1 for it, but he had to charge something. So I bought it for $1, and he apologized for selling it to me. And I'm like, no, dude, like, it's totally cool. I understood what I was getting into. As a matter of fact, I buy every teapot holding a succubus. It just happens to be the first. And so I bought this, and I've had it on display. And oddly enough, the gentleman that went with me has had nothing but good luck since I bought it. And he had been looking for a job in a particular field for 5 years. Rode home with this, and within a week, he got 2 offers and took the one that was kind of like a lifelong dream job. Got that. Had not been dating very much. Met 2 women online. Got to know both of them. Dated one for a while. His daughter received 3 or 4 scholarships to college shortly after him holding the teapot. So I don't know. Maybe the succubus is good luck for my friend. But this is a... If you believe in that type of thing, this would be a legitimately cursed artifact that holds the essence of a succubus eternally, unless I take the gaffer's tape off.
Wait a minute.
It ruins the story.
No. You can do a CAT scan.
Oh, there we go. Nice. Yeah, I've been asked about, am I going to take that off? And I'm like, no, because I bought this. To me, I don't believe it's cursed. I honestly, genuinely believe this gentleman believes it's cursed. But to me, if I take the gaffer's tape off and open it, it ruins the story. I have no fear of being, possessed by a succubus, anything like that. If I did, my wife would probably monetize it and sell video, then, right? Have a OnlyFans channel, like, hey, right? But I don't believe that, but it's interesting to me that people do. And so I messaged Margaret initially, and I messaged Derek. I said, this is a really interesting story, and this is a little extreme, but, where do we draw the line in superstition, right? Where do we draw the line with this? There are people that believed in cursed artifacts and items, and we're going to hear another story about one of those shortly. But, we should talk about this at Dragon Con, because it is interesting, and even though this is extreme, there are some things that we don't think of as extreme, but maybe they, guide our lives a little more than they should, or, let's talk about that. Margaret said, this is a great idea. And then we were like, well, we can bring a couple experts in who can, tell more about the larger ramifications. And so here we are, right? So we'll get our panelists' take on this, hear another artifact story, and then we'll take questions from you. So, Ben, why don't we start with you and just work our way down the line?
Sure. There's 2 things that jump out at me in terms of the curses. One of them, and I won't go into it too much, but one of them was about, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, I got an email from a woman who believed that she'd been cursed, and she asked me how to remove the curse. She'd seen me on television, and she's like, well, you're clearly the expert. I'm like, okay, thanks. And she's like, this is going on. I don't know. I'm having troubles with my relationship and this and that. And she sent this email. And those were always the most difficult ones for me to reply to because, I have background in psychology and been doing investigations, this and that. But it wouldn't help either one of us for me to just say, well, curses aren't real, go away. Right? That's not going to help her out. It's not going to help me out. So I was trying to sort of navigate a way to try and basically, again, I won't go into it. I wrote an article called the Skeptics Guide to Ethical Curse Removal. It's online if you want to look for it. And basically, I took her email to me, and I replied back to her. In each case, I tried to get her to to sort of look at it from a critical thinking perspective and say, okay, well, it's possible the things you're describing are related to this curse that you believe is on you, but more likely it's these other things. So I was trying to sort of guide her that way. But the real, in terms of cursed objects, I'll tell a quick story. It was in one of my books, Mysterious New Mexico. There was a cursed object which sort of entered my sphere. There was you guys know the crystal skulls? Of course, there's Indiana Jones and the crystal skulls. Anyway, there's a whole mythology about crystal skulls in Atlantis and this and that. But one particular one was a glass skull. It clearly wasn't crystal; it was glass, and it was found in southern Colorado. I live in New Mexico. I probably know the Hopi gentleman that sold him the curse there.
It was him.
You know what? You can't prove it. And don't check my Venmo. And so it's sort of I did a whole chapter on it. I'll try to summarize. Basically, this person found what was clearly a glass skull, just out in the desert in southern Colorado. Found this thing and took it back and said, "Well, this is the weirdest thing. Like, there's nobody around here. Why would this thing be here?" And soon showed to the people, and this is sort of gotten entrenched in the New Age community. So all of a sudden, people are coming around saying, "Do you see this glass skull? It's the weirdest thing. Like, there's no name on it. Why would this be out here?" And then the psychics would hear about this. They would come and they would meditate around it, and they would get messages from just being inside a room with this glass skull, and people they'd have these impressions. And there's this whole discussions of it. Well, was this part of like some Atlantean princess's skeleton? All this sorts of crazy stuff. And it went on for years. Where it was basically doing tours. People would come around to see this mysterious glass skull. Well, it later turned out that it was actually made by a glass blower. And I tracked the guy down. In fact, I have one in my office. I should have brought it with me, but I thought the TSA would consider it to be a weapon, so I didn't, because I've had that happen. And basically, the story, the rejoinder was that this glass blower named Brad Chavez, he would make Day of the Dead skulls and like folk crafts and things like that. And he made with this one skull that was basically a second. It wasn't good enough to sell, so he put it on a marker where he was going to build a house with his wife. Unfortunately, his wife died, but he left the skull there as a marker, like this is where we're going to have the house. And then this other lady came and just stumbled upon it and took the guy's glass skull. But meanwhile, again, people are like, the psychics are saying, "Oh my God!" And the story was there were all sorts of misfortunes attributed to it. Sure. So someone said, someone was taking it in somewhere. We had a truck broke down. Well, clearly it's the thing like that. Anyway, so when Chavez found out that his basically defective glass paperweight was people were saying it was cursed. He tracked the lady down and said, "Yeah, first of all, that's mine. Second of all, why are you on my property? Third of all, why are people coming around paying you money to meditate around my paperweight?" Anyway, that's one of the stories that it's just so fascinating to sort of see how an otherwise ambiguous object, because again, there was no context to it. Like, why is this thing there? And they just come up with all these lavish, outlandish stories about where it came from, what it could be, this and that, and no one bothered to check with local glass blowers.
I mean, it is interesting because oftentimes, as skeptics, we always get that question like, well, how could that have happened? Why would it be there? It's like, we don't know. It could be anything. Would you have guessed, oh, clearly that was placed there as a location marker by a glass blower whose wife died? I mean, obviously, that's what happened. The inability to explain individual events like that doesn't mean that it's paranormal, that something unusual or supernatural happened. It's just that you can't explain every little weird, quirky things that shit happens. Right? That's it. That's enough of an explanation. I have one question for you.
Sure.
How long ago did you buy that, the cursed?
Less than a year.
Have you had any further contact with the gentleman you purchased it from?
I have not.
I would be very curious about that because I doubt it worked. and this is why. So, so there's like those kinds of parasomnias, where people have strange events around sleep. You could think of them as either psychological or neurological, right? The classic succubus encounter is a hypnagogic hallucination, right? It's a neurological event, neurological phenomenon. And selling an item you believe to be cursed will not cure your neurological disorder, right? That would not cure this guy of whatever sleep disorder he had that caused him to have that hypnagogic hallucination. So I would suspect he's probably still having them.
But it's entirely possible, not with a succubus. It could be something different, right?
Or he's attributing it to something else.
Yeah.
Well, he'll just be attributing it to something else.
But your brain can also, if you need relief from what you believe to be a true succubus, can find you a way to
but that's the question.
change that manifestation, right?
He's a complicated, I have no idea about this guy, but
sure.
the details that you've let loose already, he has PTSD apparently. He's, hearing noises at nighttime. And he had an episode that he described as a succubus. Saying if that were a neurological episode, which would be my suspicion, that would not be cured by any psychological placebo effect. He just may be reinterpreting, the event.
Again, what I was kind of leading to was if he hasn't been visited by a succubus, doesn't mean it's in here.
Oh, you're right. You're right. That would suggest to me it was more of a psychological thing than neurological.
But I will follow up with him just to see.
Up with him.
And if he declines to answer, that's fine. I don't want to invade on what he's comfortable with. But I will check back.
But he was willing to sell you an item he thought was cursed, though.
Yeah.
You think about that. He was convinced that was cursed.
100. He
apologized.
Now. He apologized.
Yeah. But he still think about it.
Right.
He still's like, this is now your problem.
I would have had you sign a waiver. I'd be like, you know what? Here, sign this. You're not going to hold me responsible for any weird shit that happens to you.
Most insomniac drug users don't worry about legal processes.
Yeah.
Right. So,
but typically, and I'm much more deeply read in the possession literature than the cursed item literature, but when somebody believes they're actually possessed by a demon and you do like a exorcism on them, you don't cure them of their actual psychological, psychiatric, or neurological problem. It usually doesn't take. They may feel better for a period of time, but then they go right back into whatever situation they were in the first place. So the sort of fake exorcism is not really a cure for people who genuinely believe they're possessed, which is a very similar phenomenon. You believe there's some spiritual essence that's haunting you or whatever. This is just now attached to an item versus attached to themselves, and sometimes both of those things happen at the same time. But in any case, I would be very curious if you do manage to get follow-up, like how's the guy doing?
Sure. Basically. Absolutely. And I hope he's doing well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. If one is provided, I will.
Well, I have a story about a different kind of object. It actually happened here at Dragon Con. And one of a panelist said that he carried a lucky charm. And so I got up and I said, would you let me have that lucky charm over the weekend and see if your luck goes bad? We'll test it. I'll take your lucky charm. He did. He gave it up. And he told me, I feel terrible giving this up. It belonged to my mother, and she said it was lucky. And I said, no, I want to prove to you that you can go through this weekend and have a great time and not have any bad luck. And just let's try this. You know who got the worst weekend of her life? Me, because I was worried I was going to lose this precious good luck charm and destroy him. It just was, I couldn't wait to give it back to him because he found such comfort in handling this coin in his pocket because it meant something to him. And when I'm treating people for their superstitions, it's not my goal to take away what they're holding dear. And if it's a rabbit's foot or something and it gives them comfort, they're going to have to think about that critically. And if they want to test it, that's great. But I really laughed about the fact that I was the one suffering with bad luck.
Yeah, I think superstition-wise, perspective is a lot, right? I remember when I was younger and thinking, why are people worried about having, bad luck on Friday the 13th? And I thought, well, I don't think that way. If luck has anything to do with it, then I'll just be luckier than everybody else because all the bad luck's running to everyone else. And so I just felt like Friday the 13th should be like my lucky day, right? Now, long term, it's no more lucky or unlucky than any other day, but that's that was kind of my take on it. And then like haunted items, I heard something and I thought this was really interesting. So if you think about kind of the broader implications of scientifically believing in that ghosts could interact with people, right? If you believe that ghosts can interact with people and cause harm to folks or cause bad things to happen to them, if you look at the history of the world and in people that died, if they had the ability to get some type of revenge or some type of justice towards people that harmed them when they became a ghost, there would be a lot more difficulties for old rich white people, right? Like there's a lot of people that have caused a lot of harm in their lives that aren't obsessively haunted by hundreds or thousands of people. So either the whole ghost thing doesn't exist or we don't understand the laws by which they abide by. So,
well, and that also, of course, raises the issue of communication beyond the dead. I mean, that's always been one of the main arguments that I've pointed out, is that if people truly could contact dead people, and murder victims particularly, there should be a whole lot of solved homicides. I mean, there's lots of unsolved homicides. People, someone goes missing. Why in the world wouldn't a psychic detective or anybody else, psychic medium, be able to contact the spirit of any given dead person and say, so what happened to you? Who killed you? Under what circumstances? Where's your body buried? Why would there be any unsolved homicides at all?
Of course, there are psychic detectives who claim that they can do that, but under controlled conditions, they do know better than the random guessing. And
it's weird.
The cases get solved by good old-fashioned detective work, and the psychic contributions tend to be non-existent. But I think the through line here, if I can, that ties a lot of these things together is the sense that people intuitively have in the notion of essence, right? That there is something more to physical objects than their physical structure. Bruce Hood wrote a book about this called Supersense. It's I do recommend it. Like, for example, and we're born with this sense, this intuition. If you go to a young child, like 4 or 5-year-old child, that was a favorite toy, and you say, hey, if I took away that toy and gave you an exact duplicate, would that be okay with you? They're not okay with that at all. Even if they're exactly physically the same, it's not the same thing. There's an essence to their toy or their animal or whatever that just wouldn't be there. And there's all kinds of like magic tricks you can do in psychological experiments to trick them into thinking like their object was vanished and replaced or whatever, and they are unhappy with that. That's why you have a coin, the lucky coin. What is it about that coin versus any other coin? Well, that it has there's something to it. There's got to be some essence there. And that drives a lot of superstition. It drives a lot of these beliefs and things like and essence and sort of spiritual possession are kind of just extensions of each other. So the whole idea that an item can be cursed. Well, how is the item cursed? Because there's something in there, right? There's something supernatural, spiritual, some essence in there. If you read the history of a lot of famous cursed items, a lot of them get that reputation because either in reality or just the narrative that builds up around it is that they were exposed to some kind of horrific emotional event. The boy who owned this toy drowned, and now
James Dean's car.
Yeah, everyone who holds this toy feels sadness or whatever. Yeah, or James Dean, either whether it's cursed or not cursed, or it's just possessed, or it's just an item that carries the essence of that emotion forward, and that people can experience that. So I think that's kind of and this is an intuitive thing that we all have. that sort of ties all of this together. And the way to overcome it, of course, is just with critical thinking. Is just trying to understand, well, this may be how our brains evolve, but this is not how reality works. And it gives you the ability to say, okay, I may feel this way, but it's not true. I don't have to let it haunt me.
Sure. In the magic world, there's a form of magic called mentalism, and there's an organization of psychic entertainers, and there's a lot of mentalists who do stage mentalism and mind reading, as I do. Some of you may have seen me in shows here at Dragon Con. Read someone's mind or tell of future events or predict things, and those are all tricks, right? But there's people that do those in private readings and claim that they're real, or at least don't deny that they're real. And a lot of this is based on emotion, as you said, and attachment, and a need for comfort, right? And then we as humans are seeking a bigger experience. And so we can ignore things that don't fit into what makes us comfortable and remember the things that do. So if an item's cursed, every bad thing that happens is easy to attribute to the bad thing. Something good happens, you go, oh, well, I kind of broke free from the curse for a little bit. Well, I mean, like, that's not how that works, but, that's how we feel like, right? And as a magician, I've had people ask me to break curses, and I tell them, no, I don't do real magic. I don't do real mind reading. These things aren't real. Don't pay someone to, someone's just taking your money. I was offered $10,000 in a trip to California to read a woman's dreams and to help her to understand her dreams. And I literally could have said anything I wanted, and they would have bought into it. And I told them that it wasn't real, and they made a second offer and asked if it was just a money issue. They had more money. And I'm like, no. And so we had to talk about the psychological implications of what dreams mean and trying to find a professional therapist. And they, as far as I know, chose to ignore the advice.
Well,
So,
Kurt, you won't believe this, but there is a woman out in the world named Margaret Downey, and she claims to be able to talk to the dead. And I have received phone calls and emails asking for help to talk to
So
dead.
it's not you.
It's not me. It's
Just to
someone
clarify.
named Margaret Downey. And she apparently can read messages in water, and she has a special machine that she can say what the voices are, but only she can say what has been said through this machine. No one else can hear it, of course. But,
sure.
But she's brought shame to the Downeys. But no, it's and it's really sad to see those emails of my brother died, and I didn't get to say goodbye, and it's just really, really sad. But I when I write back, I say, this is not this Margaret Downey that you seek, but I am a skeptic. And then I go into, I would highly recommend that you go to grief therapy or find a psychologist to help you through this. I don't, I'm not nasty to them or, call them foolish or anything, but they're looking for help. We people have to find emotional help in any way possible, and a tragedy usually brings out superstitious behavior. We just...
Yeah. And I think the whole point about, this attributing essence that's not there is really a great point. Because, like, Margaret's got rabbit feet in front of her, and apparently, they weren't very lucky for the rabbit. But, once it's removed from the rabbit and died, all of a sudden it's a lucky rabbit's foot. Something being attributed to the rabbit's foot or the kettle, we kind of think of those as different, a succubus versus maybe, you find your lucky parking spot. But the attribution of something beyond natural to a natural object is the same, right? I think it's funny when somebody says, oh, I have a lucky rabbit's foot, and they carry it with me everywhere. Well, yeah, every time something good happens to you, you're going to attribute it because you carry it with you everywhere, right? I mean, how miserable would your life be if nothing ever good happened to you? So it's easy to make those attributions, right?
Yeah. I think part of it is wanting to sort of hedge against a random world. If your worldview is that there's a finite amount of luck, that is, if you have more than that, then somebody else has less. then you're going to want to get any edge, right? This is why athletes will wear their favorite shirt, or Rafael Nadal will not step on lines in the U.S. Open, things like that. And so if your belief is that the world is not simply run by randomness, but there's ways that we can get some sort of slight edge, and maybe if I just do this ritual, whatever else, then somehow I'll get a little bit. That's very powerful. I just want to quickly throw out one thing that always interests me is the functional role that some curses have. For example, Shakespeare famously cursed anybody that moved his bones. He's like, hey, don't mess with my grave, because I will curses he who removes his bones. And it's interesting, if you look at the historical precedent for that, it was also the same thing with King Tut's tomb. In fact, most kings had that same curse. It wasn't unique to King Tut. It was just that it's a general prohibition. Don't violate these tombs. And of course, it was because they didn't want people violating tombs, right? So if you believe in the curse, then you're less likely to do that. And in Shakespeare's time, grave robbing was a pretty common thing. So there were people who were there were dissection men, and what do they call them, resurrection men, who would dig up bones and give them to doctors. He said advisedly. And because at the time there was a serious need for cadavers for medical purposes, and they could only get them from prisoners. Anyway, the point is that I always found that interesting is when people sort of build up the notion of curses, that's not an intentionally created curse. I mean, almost certainly not. And
right.
Same thing in my case with the crystal skull. But there are times when again there were people like, well, how can I sort of, impose these sort of social norms? You don't want to be cursed, do you? Well, then don't mess with my tomb.
Right.
Well, I hear it's very unlucky to have a cell phone in a theater and using it.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
There's a lot of really bad luck going to come your way.
So I see we have a question already, and we'll take questions. And I will say before we start the questions, we have like the best tech crew of any track here.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Awesome. They control that microphone to the nth degree. Do not touch the microphone. And mysteriously, the microphone will lift and lower and raise and whatever it needs to get to you. So you stand comfortably, and the microphone will find you. He's got one of these. All right. First question.
All right. In Las Vegas, there's a gentleman named Zach Baggins who has a museum of haunted curiosities. And going back to P.T. Barnum and Ripley's Believe It or Not, there's been a big business in displaying haunted items. And I was wondering if all of you had thoughts on the ethics of that, the morality of showcasing and monetizing cursed items, and how that morality changes depending on whether or not you believe in the curses or you don't believe in the curses.
Interesting you asked that as I bring this out in publicly display. I didn't charge for you to come here. So, yeah, right? And if you had an entire museum of cursed items and you didn't burn down or something, does that even make sense, right? So I think ethically, especially, coming from the lens of a magician who does, psychic entertainment, and I always say that I'm not psychic, it's not real. I've not been to the museum. I haven't been to any cursed items museums. I do know that I've dealt with people who kind of work in that industry some, and they typically say it is alleged, or, it is thought to have been cursed, or I think that's like a really low bar, but at the same time, it's kind of like, we watch movies of, scary movies and, ghost stories or monster movies and things like that. I think as long as it's not real and it's for fun and it's for entertainment. Okay, I'm wearing a shirt from a voodoo store in New Orleans, right? Voodoo store in New Orleans. I went in there. I don't believe in voodoo at all, right? But I thought it was interesting. And they were giving readings and things there, and they were, they were passing off things as true. So then the ethics gets to, do they believe they're true? Right? There are people that believe voodoo is true and that they believe they really have the psychic powers. And there's others that are just doing it to take money. So I think anytime you're in business, anytime you're dealing with people in real life in hope and expectations, and you do anything that you don't believe is real, especially if you're charging for it, that's an ethical problem for me personally. If you believe that it's real and you're doing it, I still don't believe that, this is cursed. This gentleman 100% believed this was real. He believed he sold me a cursed teapot with the essence of a succubus in there for $1. I don't think he did anything ethically wrong other than he sold me a succubus, right? So that's a different. But as far as the business transaction, he was up front, right? Hey, this has a succubus in it, and it's buy at your own risk. It says on here, do not remove this. Like, he does tell you how to keep the succubus inside. So there's kind of a multi-level of ethics there, and I'm not trained in ethics. I have certain ethic in my field that I have to be aware of and work in. And ethics are different. Angie's a doctor, and the ethics that a doctor holds are different than ethics that a lawyer holds. And when you talk about confidentiality, okay, some ethics standards are wider gaps than others, okay? So I don't know that I can speak directly to it, but for me, I couldn't pass off something that I knew was false as real.
Can I tell my story really quick?
Oh, yeah,
actually
absolutely.
Dovetails with that, because my close encounter with a famous cursed item was in a haunted museum. And it was in the basement of Ed and Lorraine Warren's house, which they claim to be the most haunted place in the world. At least they claim that when they were alive. They're both dead. So we were investigating them back when we were a newly minted skeptical organization, where they happened to be in our backyard, like 1 or 2 towns over. And so Ed has his spiel that he would give everybody. And part of that was he would give you a tour of his haunted basement, where he has all these, famously cursed and haunted items. One of which was like a player's manual to the Dungeons and Dragons game, which I got 10 of those at home. But the most famous one, of course, was Annabelle, right? There's subsequently been movies made about it. And he had Annabelle in a glass case. And it's a Raggedy Ann doll. It's a generic Raggedy Ann doll. That's all it is. But it was a huge mythology built up around it. Now, for some reason, at some point, he brings us down into the basement. He gives us the quickie. He warns us about Annabelle, and then he says, I have to step out for a minute. He steps out, and he leaves us alone in the basement for like 5-10 minutes, which I'm not sure exactly why he did that. I don't know if he was spying on us. He wanted to see what we would do. So, of course, we did exactly what he told us not to do, which was to taunt Annabelle. Like, we weren't supposed to acknowledge her or taunt her. He said, because if you do that, I'll have to cleanse you by visualizing you in a Christ light. Then you're good. So you got to tell me. If you do anything you're not supposed to do, because I'll have to do my magical thing, and then you'll be all right. And then he had all the anecdotes about, one guy was snarky to Annabelle, and then he died 5 years later in a motorcycle accident, right? So how do you explain that? So we, of course, did everything we weren't supposed to do. Here we are, 20 years later. We're doing, nothing bad's happened. We're okay. But that was Annabelle. And then you see the movie, of course. This haunted doll is like a completely, all of the Ed and Lorraine Warren movies are hilarious because they portray them in the movies as like these serious researchers. They were the crankiest old couple you can imagine. They were clueless. They were like, really, it was the contrast between the movie versions of them and the real life versions of them couldn't possibly be more stark. But that was my encounter with a famous cursed item.
Nice. All right, next question.
Okay, I am asking for advice, so let me give you the background to this story. I run a Facebook page, Alabama Atheist, and we get some interesting messages. Some of them are trolling, and I think we're pretty good at detecting who the trolls are. But we got one not too long ago, and I think well, I'll paraphrase, but pretty close to the exact words. Hey, do you all have anybody that can remove a curse? So I don't know that the engagement went the way I wanted to, because I wanted to engage further. But I responded and said, well, we're not exorcists, we're not experts on curses, we don't believe in curses. And I got a response back, well, thank you. And that's as far as it went. So is there any advice from the panel how to engage with someone who may honestly believe, they still could have been a troll, but may honestly believe that they
So I would
cursed?
ask, what would be your long-term intent if you were to engage? If I were to send you a message, hey, I've got something that's cursed, could you remove this curse? What would be, like, to you, the ideal outcome at the end? What's the purpose of engaging?
The ideal outcome, well, I think the interim outcome would be to relieve their anxiety,
Sure.
if it's really true. And then the long-term outcome would be to free them from the idea that they're cursed.
Sure. So I think the way to approach that would be to start a conversation by asking questions. Say, I appreciate you contacting us. Although we're not experts in curses, I would like more information about the situation you're in and what are your concerns. And then you'd be able to address those and may be able to walk them through, okay, so why do you believe this? How do you believe this was cursed? And then explain, your atheistic or skeptical viewpoint of, well, I can see how you believe that. But with us, we find it important to test things like that. So if you thought about this, thought about that, and then like slowly work them through getting past the anxiety of the item, so forth, and then the implications of it, not being cursed, that type of, show them where other people have paid to get a curse removed and that nothing changed. So, but I think until you, because back to, I think the common theme here, whether you're carrying a lucky rabbit's foot or you're scared that you have a cursed item, is comfort in dealing with what you consider the unknown, right? And one of the most comforting thing you can get is support from somebody, a real person. Oftentimes people that have these issues are lacking real comfort and support at home or families. And I'm not an expert in psychology, so this is kind of my take on that. But if you give them an outlet for that potential and show them that, regardless if I can help you or not, I care, and let's talk about what this really is, I think it starts with getting them to open up about what's the issue. Because sometimes their issue is not even what they think it is once they start talking.
Yeah, now I would just add again. I wrote an article exactly on what you're asking about, and I would agree with most of what he said, except insofar as in terms of saying that I'm not an expert on it. So in my response to the person, I recognized that I needed to portray myself as an expert on this, because that's why they're coming. If I say I don't know anything about it, then they're not going to believe anything that I'm trying to help them to. So I was very careful. I tried to thread the needle very closely. I said I didn't want to encourage the belief in the curse, but I wanted to navigate around that. So assuming that they did in fact believe they were cursed, and I'm certain the woman did, then it's not going to do any good to say you're not cursed, go away.
Right.
On the other hand, I can't ethically say, yeah, you are cursed. So I was like, well, I don't think you're cursed. And I said, I have a lot of experience about curses, which I do. I mean, that was legitimate. And so I tried to navigate. I said, okay, well, I don't think you're cursed, but if you are, I want to leave that door open. If you are, here's ways to look at it. So, for example, we talked about, if you're saying that the bad things are happening to you. Well, bad things happen to everybody. I think maybe just pointing them out, you're noticing them more. So I bring in the psychology of it. So that would be what I would say would be to, because if you say I don't know, we don't do this, then they're going to go to somebody else who in fact will endorse there and exacerbate the problem. So I tried to sort of thread that needle, sort of not carefully trying not to encourage the belief, but work around it and say, well, I don't think you are, but if you are, think about these things. And so, for example, she was talking about how bad things were happening and there were more fights with her spouse. I said, I said, try and sort of focus on the good things. And I think you'll notice that if you follow these instructions, the fights will occur less and less. I said, it's not going to totally go away, but I was trying to sort of encourage her to approach the issue more with critical thinking lens.
I'd add one thing to that as well. First of all, I think your initial response is perfectly fine. If that's, you're not obligated to intervene here. And if you think you're in over your head, then it's fine to say, listen, we don't believe in curses. I don't think you're cursed, but there's nothing else, but we don't do anything about it specifically. But if you do want to, at least take some responsibility because they contacted you, I think the first and most important thing is to establish that they're not having a genuine medical problem. And so because you're not medical experts, I'm assuming, and you don't want to get in over your head on that. So, one approach to take is like, well, sorry to hear this. Can you give us a little information about what you're experiencing? And then, if it sounds like anything that could potentially be either a psychological, psychiatric, or neurological or medical problem, you could say, well, I understand your concern. Probably the best thing to do is to first consult, whatever, a doctor, a psychologist, or whatever, to address, this possibility or these issues, and they could probably guide you further and where to go from there. So just sort of steering them to appropriate professional help is probably the best thing you could do for them, in my opinion, if that is the nature of the issue. Right? Does that make sense? And otherwise, this is what people come to me for problems because I'm a doctor and I'm online, and that's my advice to them is always the same thing. That sounds like I triage for them. That sounds like a problem that you need to discuss with your primary care doctor, or you may want to consider talking to an orthopedist or whatever. But I don't give them advice because you can't treat people online. I just sort of triage the issue for them. So I think that's a good way to approach it.
Well, the next person that approaches me with this, I think I have a curse, I'm going to send them to Dr. Novella.
Yeah. Yeah, getting proper medical help in those cases is absolutely vital. I haven't, again, through my lens, I haven't talked with anybody that had a actual medical issue more as a superstitious issue.
The stats are about 90% of the time it's a medical issue.
Yeah,
Seriously.
And that doesn't need to be overlooked. 100%. I'm so glad you made that point. Good question. All right, do we have next?
Hi. You were talking a little bit about that innate feeling that everyone has about objects having some kind of essence that we're not able to really understand or describe, but we know it's there. Has there been any research that you know of about what the mechanism behind that might be, evolutionary origin, what kind of evolutionary benefit that might have, or do you have any hypothesis about that?
I have a hypothesis about it. There isn't a lot of research because that's sort of the evolutionary psychology thing where it's just hard to prove your hypothesis. But part of the thinking is like, why would we have that? Why would we have that strong belief? So one hypothesis is that if you're a parent, right, you want to know that your child is actually your child, right? And substituting another baby that might look really similar to your child is not good enough. It has to actually be your child. And so having that, it could just be an extension of this parenting instinct that we need to, like, our actual offspring matters, right? It's not just a generic baby. It's my baby. And when you think about kids playing with toys, they're like practicing parenting sort of instincts and skills. It's right? When a child has a stuffed animal that they care for, that's basically their parenting instinct. There were at least the beginnings of it. So anyway, that's, I think, one potential hypothesis. I don't know of any way to prove or disprove that, but that's one idea. There could be others.
And people tend to humanize things.
Yeah. Right.
They see faces in things, and it's just people want a connection to themselves.
Sure.
Hi. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the phenomena of people in general, just human beings, like, for instance, myself, brought up Catholic, non-practicing, do not really buy into that. However, why would I still, and I did, bury St. Joseph in the backyard upside down to sell my house? Like, and for instance, when you said, oh, I don't believe in voodoo, I just thought this was really cool, why in my mind, if I was brought up Catholic and still don't do that, thought, oh, heck, I'm not playing with voodoo, I believe in that. How, as a people, are we so picky and choosy about like things that are on the continuum of religion to what you all are talking about is not at all being superstitious. And how do we all and why do we all pick and choose different things to believe? Have any of you researched that?
I'll give you some, not research, but I'll give you some personal experience along that way. And I think about this too, okay? So I was born, raised, and brought up Baptist, right? Very, very fundamental Baptist. And for those of you who are interested in that story and some other, I'm doing another panel on Sunday. If any of you heard of the Happy Shiny People, the Duggar story, okay? So a friend of mine was a personality on that program, on the series, and they're coming here, and we're going to discuss those very things. And so I, through the Skeptic track, decided to talk to an atheist that I knew that was a magician and try to convert them. And I started looking at what they believed and their evidence versus mine, and in a several-year process, I now am not religious, don't believe in any deity, and gave up my faith. And part of that process, the support group I had, was the Clergy Project, because I was in full-time ministry. And I find it fascinating. I have no belief in any religion or deity at all. And when I hear people discuss their old faith, and there'll be somebody in there that's Catholic or somebody in there that's Church of God, and my first thought is, well, my version of religion was better than theirs. And I think that is so stupid, right? We each create a version of God that's comfortable for us. And so I think in the end, the holding on to those things and those thoughts are comforting. When we watch football games, we pretend to be superstitious, right? If somebody's in the bathroom and we score, next time we get the ball, they got to go back to the bathroom. Do we believe that really makes a difference? No, but it's like a game.
And
right?
the other part of that is return on investment. Because with a lot of superstitions, it costs nothing to put a lucky coin in your pocket. Sure. It costs nothing not to walk on lines in a tennis match. It costs almost nothing to bury a figure in the backyard. If you don't do that, then the consequences could be bad, right? You could lose the match. You could lose humanity. So with a lot of these superstitions, it's built in that it only takes a little token effort. So a lot of people are like, better safe than sorry. I don't believe in this, but you know what? Yeah, why not?
Right. Yeah, and again, back to like the religion, like my version of religion was better than other wrong versions, right? So, burying the statue, it's a comforting, right? It's almost nostalgic in a sense. So even if you're asked about it, and I don't know if you think that maybe it does, there's a chance it could help. I don't know, right? But even if you have zero chance that it's going to help, it's kind of this nostalgic feel that gives you comfort. It's likely that whoever taught you Catholicism loved you and cared for you, and you respect them and love them, right? One of the hardest things in life is to understand that people you love and respect and care for may have taught you something that was wrong, right? So rather than give it up completely, I don't believe in it, but I'll bury the statue because it's comforting, right? And so, as long as you're aware of that, I personally don't see harm in it, but we all want comfort and connection. And so maybe that's just a way to kind of hang on to, a little piece of that and realize that there's no spiritual implications of the statue in your backyard. But it's kind of play pretend.
And quickly, there's one other layer there, just throw out there really quick, is that we all have two ways of thinking, the Kahneman thinking, fast thinking. So we have analytical thinking and intuitive thinking. This is part of being the human being. And people fall different places on the spectrum in terms of the balance between those two things. So even if you are an analytical thinker, you understand science and critical thinking, it doesn't mean you don't have that intuitive part of you as well. It's still there. It's still there telling you, hey, this is part of my culture, part of my history, part of my belief. You can still override it analytically, but still emotionally feel like there is something to it.
All right. So I was going to go to something that Ben just said too. So you mentioned the whole thing about it not being monetary. But there's something that a lot of people do that's not very skeptical. You mentioned SuperSense. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Anything collectible. Mm-hmm. That might as well be no different than bury the statue in the backyard. You watch Antiques Roadshow. Why is any of that? It's broken. It's worthless. but now it's $20,000 because some dude said, well, it's important. But it's not. It's broken. It doesn't even do its old job. So we assign these things that are just supernatural. It is. People want to think it's different, but it's no different than the cursed teapot. That teapot doesn't even work, I bet. So
You don't know that.
I don't. We can open it up. Let's see if it works. So that's my point. There is we never think about things that we as society just accept that is crazy supernatural. Like I said, there's TV shows about collectible stuff, and they assign these crazy values to broken stuff that's old you can never use. That's no different than that teapot.
Yeah, that's the historicity
Yeah.
argument. Yeah, that
Who cares?
Historicity is the same thing as saying it has an essence,
Yes.
because it is no different. And so, to give a real Dragon Con kind of example of that, if you have a prop for a beloved TV show, if that was on screen at any point, it's worth 10 times as much. This is an on-screen pop. Okay, you can't tell the difference. There's nothing you could do to tell. Right. The only sliver of legitimacy I would give that is like if you have a historical object, we may actually be able to like isolate DNA from it or something. There may be something about it that is different than a modern knockoff.
Well, but to me, the value in these things and the reason those props sell for more, and the reason is because of the story.
Yeah, there's a
right.
story.
This was $1. This was the best dollar I've ever spent.
As long as you're aware that's what it is.
Sure. But if you buy a movie prop, and I find movie props fascinating, and I think those are very cool, and to me they're worth more than one that's not on screen, because if somebody looks at it, it's at my house and they go, "What is that?" And I go, "Oh, I love this movie, and that was in the movie. You can see it in this scene."
Yeah.
It's the story, right? And it's
Absolutely.
that nostalgia, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, in the end of my life, all the money I kept will do nothing. And so if I spent it on stories that I can share, to me, that's value to me. And it doesn't have to be valuable to anybody else, but it is to me. Mm-hmm. We are out of time. We thank you for coming. We appreciate it. If